Yay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm fitting in 3 interviews this week. So I don't know if you caught the earlier ones, but here's another one. And this is someone, she just said, we seem to only see each other when one of us is interviewing the other. And it is definitely my turn. She's having on several of her shows to share what I know about a variety of topics. My favorite was that she interviewed me on a food show about my book called Croissants versus Bagels, which is not actually about food. You'll have to check that out. We'll put links in the show notes. But before I get too far along, let me formally introduce this week's guest. Today's guest is a goal strategist with a mission to transform goal culture both in and out of the workplace. Her workshops, consultations, and speaking engagements provide practical strategies that lead to tangible results. She's a TEDx speaker and the award-winning author of Your Goal Guide, a roadmap for setting, planning, and achieving your goals, turning her decades of experience into an actionable framework. Her DEB method breaks goal setting down into 3 powerful steps and is the cornerstone of her work. She's also the host of the DEB Show and the Taste Buds with Deb podcast. Please join me in welcoming Debra Eckerling. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be fun. The tables are now turned.
The tables are now turned. Thanks for joining us from your place in LA. Thrilled to have you. And as you know, this is a show about building strong networks, and the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
I kind of feel like I've always felt that I had like the leadership gene. I started leading goal groups back when I lived in Chicago. I've lived, you said decades experience, and I just felt like this really old Generation Xer, which is okay. We're swimming in that pool together. But I started, I've always been, I think it's probably, hereditary. My mom's a cheerleader. I always say she's the cheerleader's cheerleader. So definitely in my blood. But leadership is really, it's just about stepping up, seeing a need, finding a solution, but being your best self. And that's really the crux of what I do. So DEB method is foundational because it's all about what is your mission in life and how do you use it to help others. So I think I answered your question. I didn't quite answer the second part, but I finally got around to the first one.
So finding a need, seeking a solution, and being your best self is what I really took from that. And you're going to really appreciate that. And it sounds like there's lots of examples of how you've shown up in this way. I'm curious about some earlier moments when you realized you had some of these attributes.
Okay, well, I will go back to what I started to say and cut myself off from. So my first job after college was working for Barnes & Noble, and I was leading events. Whenever I needed to fill my calendar, I would hang out in the cafe because I wanted it to feel like to be this community resource. And one day, one of my regulars said, "Hey, Deb, why don't you start a writer support group?" And I said, "If you think people show up, let's give it a try." And for me, that meant, what did you accomplish? How can we support you? What resources do you need? And what are your goals for next time? And that was really the first step to where I am now, because I realized the power of goal setting, accountability, and also that piece of celebrating and motivation firsthand. So I think, and I'm sure if I went to the Wayback Machine, I could come up with other examples from, high school and college. I was on the competitive speech team. Yes, I used to talk for fun. That was my social life. You're welcome. But really, it's just putting people together and helping us all be our best self. And that's really what started me on this path, was this goal group. And not only so I would ask people what their goals were every week, but I would never ask people to do anything that I wasn't prepared to do myself. So I was setting goals and accomplishing as well. So it was really win-win all around.
Yeah, it sounds like a transformational moment for you, but I do want to go into this Wayback Machine. I want to go back to when you were a kid, like on the playground. What kind of kid were you? Because it feels like kind of who you are today, you've always been. Did your parents or your teachers see potential in you? Were you the one raising your hand, or were you kind of quietly watching the room? Did you participate in after-school activities, run for school office? What kind of kid were you?
I was a joiner. For sure. Well, when I was a little kid, we would put on plays. That was, the thing that you did when you were a kid, right? We'd all come together, put on plays to make people watch. And then in a high school, I like auditioned for everything. I was in a comedy troupe. I did the teen modeling thing, which it was just all like community development, bring people together. And then, like I said, I did competitive public speaking. And especially by junior, senior year, when I've been doing it all the way through, we were the mentors for the ones coming in. And I just remembered, I started school at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, was there for a year and a half, loved it. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I figured, okay, nice change, right? In the journalism school, there were like 2 or 3 other people I graduated with. So that was just beyond hilarious, ridiculous. They were planning to leave. I was planning to stay, and I actually transferred mid-year sophomore year. I know this is relevant. I will get there. But I remember for Freshman Friday, when you were looking at all the different clubs, and then the speech teacher at UNL, or actually it was her husband who caught me looking. It's like, come on in, let me tell you about this. And I did participate in a high school, so it wasn't totally unfamiliar to me, but it was just, I looked and they got me.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about this competitive speaking thing. Was it like a debate team, like oratory skills? Like what was the focus of the course?
Well, so competitive forensics, they have 2 different things, debate, which I was not involved in, and individual events. In the individual events, there was, I started out doing like the drama. There's the drama, literary, and then there's writing and participating in your own speaking. My favorite was after dinner speaking. So it was a serious speech with a humorous point, which is really funny because I am not funny, especially when I'm trying to be funny, then I am really not funny. So, but that by the time that I graduated, I think I participated in everything at least once. But I found, whereas I started with, the drama stuff, prose and duo, I ended up really gravitating toward, informative, persuasive. And whenever somebody asks me what advice I have for kids, I always say, start talking. Because if you can talk, if you can communicate, you can accomplish anything. And I know that those skills, especially honed in this competitive speaking, I could, I feel lost for words ish now, but basically drop me in anywhere and I can talk. It could
so
be 2
interesting.
people, it could be a room, right?
I went to a really large high school. My graduating class had 1,300. My sister, 6 years earlier, had a graduating class of 1,800, which was when it was at its largest. A suburban high school, by the way. And I remember looking in 11th grade, 12th grade for some kind of speaking. Yeah, I want public speaking. I wanted something. And surprisingly, for school that size, we didn't have anything like that. And I knew that was a skill I wanted to develop. And I was already having a few opportunities to do some professional speaking, or I should say public speaking. I wasn't being paid. A handshake and a burrito, maybe, but that's about it. But yeah, it was just really interesting that you had that opportunity. And I knew about debate teams since then, but this is a different side that I think I wasn't familiar with. And I'm glad you explained it, because I'm sure others were like, wait, what is that? So, I mean, clearly you had that interest and you were willing to kind of dive into that and then continue into that into college. I'm curious, at, I don't know, let's say 12 or so years old, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? And was there like a plan laid out for you by your expectations of your family? Was college a definite thing for you? Like, what was the sort of future goal?
I always knew I was a writer.
Mm.
So and we can go even earlier, 5, 6, I started telling stories young and writing stories, and it was always my absolute favorite. And so communication, writing, talking, whatever, it's always been this common theme for me. One thing that I will share, so I was sick as a baby. And because of that, I always have gone through life realizing that I was here for a reason. So when you have that, you go through. So I've always wanted to do something that impacts others, to make other people's lives better. Did I know that it was going to be this? Probably not. I am. I freelance writer, and I've written 3 books. And I work in the writing community is my happy place. The writing, the speaking, the goal, everything kind of comes together for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was always going to be a higher education. But the plan was they give you family living class in high school. I don't know if they still do that, and they give you a plan to take care of. And it was always okay, go to college, take some time off, go back to school, meet someone, get married, have kids. Well, I graduated from college. I think that's the only part of that ideal plan. And when it was in my 20s, my mom sold her house, and I said, "Great, if I have to move, I'm going to LA. You want to come?" And so we took 2 cars, we drove cross country, and we've been in LA ever since.
Wow. And this is interesting because you grew up in Chicago, you went to school at UNL. What was
And then I graduated from UW-Madison. Go Badgers.
Oh, okay. And
Have to,
UW-Madison. Yep. And
and I have to share this is the thing too, and it was completely random. UNL taught me to love football, and then when I transferred, that was back when the Badgers were terrible. So it was just, fortunately,
Yep.
they've improved, and but I have absolutely no idea where I was going with this.
So when you were growing up and you went to college and you clearly had a communications background that you were interested in focusing on, was there like a plan for how you were going to make money with writing and speaking and all of those things, or was journalism enticing to you, or was there sort of a next step? What was the degree you even got as an undergrad?
Oh, my undergrad degree is journalism, news editorial, and it ended up being a news editorial because I couldn't decide. I thought I wanted PR. I thought I wanted broadcasting. Oh my goodness. When I was a sophomore, they gave us an opportunity to be on the radio, and I took it, and I was terrible. So the fact that I do 2 live shows that are also 2 podcasts, to grow from that to this is just, it's proof. The more you talk, the better you get, the more comfortable you are. So I am an awesome example of that. But
Yeah.
I did end up with that news editorial degree. And did I know what I wanted? No, I knew I wanted to write. And then as so many people, Generation Xers, moved back home after college, couldn't get work, started working at Barnes and Noble. And then when I transferred to the other store for the events person, that's really where I started to come in as my own.
Mhm.
And because I mentioned before that I was setting goals during the group, the goals I was setting was to write these fun slice of life pieces. So if ever an opportunity came about to do some writing, I would have clips. And wouldn't you know, I was at an event. It was, and I think it was something like a Generation Expo or something. And I met guy was selling magazine subscriptions, and I said, "Well, actually, I'm a writer. Are you looking for writers?" And I had clips, and one of these stories that I wrote for fun, they published, and then I ended up writing features, and that really is what led me to my first writing gig. So isn't it fun how everything kind of like intertwines?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you were sort of open to putting your skills to use in some way, but stalled on exactly what that looked like. Meanwhile, you get a job working in a store, you're doing events, which is sort of, you're about community and bringing people together. You're listening to feedback from one of your customers. You say, oh, let's do this. And then you decide that you're going to, be accountable as well to them
Right?
and follow through on your own best advice, which I think is one of the things many of us struggle to do. I'm very good at giving other people advice. And now you realize like there's a skill out there that people can value and appreciate, and you're able to market that. You start to develop some clips to have at the ready, which that preparedness is something I think a lot of people skip. They are knocking on doors hoping for their big break without having anything, any evidence to show that they actually know how to do the work. So you were ready when the opportunity came to you, which was fantastic. And I'm curious, like, did you end up in a job along the way, like in a corporate sort of way or nonprofit, or did you continue just like focusing on writing as a career?
Oh, I have had several jobs. Not for the last several years, but so I went from working at Barnes and Noble to working in publishing. And then when I moved to LA, I was I started writing, I wrote for the Baywatcher in Marina Del Rey. And if you ever move, and this is great now, but I used to tell the story, if you ever move to a new town, start writing for the local paper. You get to meet everybody. And now you don't even need to write for a local paper. If you have a blog or a podcast, you have a way to meet people and continue conversations anyway. But what had happened is I moved here and I got a job. I was a temp at a private school and they kept asking me back. And I said, if you want to keep asking me back, you're going to have to create a job for me, which is what they did. I was assistant to the director of admissions. And it was also a really good opportunity because I was able to freelance after work and on the weekends and really do these two things. And my background is communications and project management. I was production editor when I worked in publishing, but those themes have been in all of my jobs. So I went from the private school to working in corporate. Yes, I worked in corporate. People do a double take. I do a double take when I say that. For 7 years in financial services, I was director of admissions and then business manager for another company. And then my boss left and that job went away. And this was the end of 2007. So it was right at like the beginning of all of the social, right? When social media, like right before it started being mainstream, right before blogging. And in tandem with that, in 2002, I started my writers group up again in Santa Monica at the Barnes & Noble, which doesn't exist anymore, but apparently it is coming back. It's a big LA thing. All the bookstores kind of went away and now they're starting to come back again. Anyway, but I started leading these goal groups and people would say, hey, Deb, you're good at this. Can I hire you to help me finish my book? I've been trying to write it for years. We got it done in a few months. Or Deb, you're good at this. Will you speak at my event? So I always do a lot of different things. Very surprising. Still do. But even with JOBs, as you call them, I was pursuing the goal thing and the writing thing. And the live group evolved over the years as well. It was a hybrid, online only, hybrid again now. And it's not just for writers, but writers, creatives, and entrepreneurs, because if you're one, you're the other too. So in this mix of a Deb life, I was doing all these different things that I loved. And then with social, I learned social by creating it for my group, which is Write Out Online. I learned blogging by starting to blog, which led to other kinds of opportunities.
Wow. I mean, it's an interesting moment in the US history, our economy, where we were with social media. 2008, 2009, a lot of people started their own businesses because they got laid off. They sort of given an opportunity to consider what was next and decide, you know what, maybe the JOB isn't as secure as I thought it was. Let me actually see what I can do on my own for a little while. And then, here we are 15 years later. For you, it sounds like you were doing, and I want to pull this out of your story for those who are listening. You were developing both skills, testing ideas, and building a little revenue stream on the side for years. It sounds like for 6+ years you were really doing that while you had the day job, and you kept at it. I remember I was working a day job, my last real day job, which I left in 2014. And for 5 years of that time, I had a side hustle that was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And my friend and mentor, Dory Clark, at some point there was like an intervention, like a year before I left. There was a dinner that I was co-hosting with her and a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and people who had these strong side hustles. And it really felt like they were trying to get me to like give notice and leave my job. And I had never realized until that moment, like how much I was like holding on to this, false sense of security of a paycheck and, healthcare. And it just dropped all these ideas in my head. And this is the thing she said to me was, you'll know it's time to leave your job when it gets in the way of your business. So there's this way of like taking the time to really build up those skills and find out what you're good at before you just quit. And it sounds like you had that opportunity. And then when your role went away, there was this new thing, a new way to communicate, basically, which is like your jam. And you're like, I will test this out. And you did it by testing it out in the group you'd already formed. And early on, it was easy to become probably better known because not like most people just didn't have time to test that out. So how did knowing those skills around blogging and doing social media posts for your writers group like help you entice, more speaking opportunities, more opportunities to get hired for coaching or for support around writing books? Like, how did you figure out those early offerings when it was the thing you were doing, or did you find your way to another job in that time frame?
I actually I found my way to another job in doing that, because I developed those skills. This was around 2011. I got a job working for an education startup, developing their blog and their social media. I was there for a little over a year, and then they're like, "Great, we're glad you started. We're going to bring on someone, cheaper to do this work that you've developed this platform," which was fine. And then I had another blip of a social media gig toward the end of that year. And then that following year, it really was kind of like exploring. I was doing so many different things between writing. I talk about, I think I mix and match now. I was writing a newsletter for one company. I was doing a little bit of coaching in social media. So it was very much that. Then the end of end of 2013, I ended up talk about leadership skills as the foreperson on a 6-week jury. And it was well, I'm like, ooh, good, jury duty, a networking opportunity. And I did make friends I'm still connected with, by the way. But 6 weeks on a jury, it beginning of 2014, it was almost like starting from scratch again. And then somebody posted that Social Media Examiner was looking for editors, and I ended up working for them. So that was my other side thing for, gosh.
Okay, I gotta pause. The Social Media
Yes.
Examiner thing caught my attention in particular, and also I've never ever, including myself, thought about jury duty and thought, ooh, networking. I'll admit, gotten off from jury duty every time I've been asked to. I've always gone to offer myself, but I've never actually been called, and I'm grateful because I'm like, oh, such an interrupter of my time. I've never thought, yeah, these will be interesting people. So fascinating that you still have connections to that. But Social Media Examiner is like a well-known group. They're still around. They're definitely kind of reached a point of notoriety, and so to have that credential early on is really interesting. How did you end up being a person who like leapt to the front of that line? Like you were dabbling, a lot of people were dabbling. Like, was there a connection? Was there an introduction? Did someone help you sort of find your way in, or was it just like a cold call that you sort of submitted your application and they pulled you out of the pile?
One of my friends posted that they were looking for an editor, and I said, "Oh, great, can you send me the information?" So I think because of that, I was not just another application, but and at the time they were looking for editors for 2 sites. So it was My Kids Adventures, which doesn't exist anymore, and Social Media Examiner, and whoever they hired was going to work on both, which, as we've already determined, I like fun and interesting projects. And I had written a book called Purple Pencil Adventures, Writing Prompts for Kids of All Ages. Minor tangent. I've been coaching people on writing books, and I wanted to write a book. So I took this blog that came from coaching kids on their writing skills. So I had a little bit of that kid background in addition to a background working in social media for these 2 companies. So ended up doing a little bit of both, and then I ended up doing more for My Kids Adventures. And then when My Kids Adventures went away, I went back to doing more editing for Social Media Examiner, on top of which Social Media Marketing World was coming up. So I was hired, I think, February, and Social Media Marketing World was coming up. And then one day I got an email with my hotel reservation for Social Media Marketing World. I think I just worked there for a week or 2 at the time to come in and work it. And I told them, just so you know, my skills are not best served spinning a sign and pointing people. I have a background doing events and networking, so they put me in charge of table talks. And by the time I left, I created my last year doing the event. I created the content concierge program, which helped people figure out what sessions to attend that would help them reach their goals of the conference. And so I was working for them for 4.5 years, and then also freelancing and doing the goal thing. So it was, and I have to add one more thing. I met Dory Clark at Social Media Examiner one year. So hi, Dory, if you're watching.
Yeah. We'll definitely put a link to my interview with Dory Clark in the show notes for those who aren't familiar with her work. It's a great interview. So what I love is that you're iterating and trying things out, and you got my curiosity about this idea of content concierge, because like I'm doing the other piece, which is helping speakers really create really thoughtful, strategic, transformative, actionable content for their 90-minute session, 75-minute session. And this idea that you can match that with people having a strong sense of what are they even looking for, and then going to those sessions and meeting people at those sessions, which is a big piece that I focus on. So that's pretty cool that you had sort of the playground to try all that out and see where your skills matched, like a gap in the market. You continue doing the side hustle thing. How many years ago are we talking at this point? This is now like 2015 or so? Like
no, we're in 2018. So
2018.
Okay, so get this. You're gonna love this Deb reiteration. So I've been working for them for several years, and then like 2 weeks before the event, I am told that as of March 1st, which was in the middle of the event, they were not going to be needing my editorial services. So here I am, already committed to the event because of this content concierge program. What am I going to do? This was my sign. All the little things that I've been doing over the years, this was the sign I took. It is time to fully step into what I was meant to do, which is help people figure out what they want and how to get it. And my mom said to me, "You hate SMART goals. Why don't you create DEB goals?" And I said, "Oh, my name works perfectly with this methodology that I had been teaching for years." And I was going to this event anyway. So that was really my testing ground of DEB. But basically, I spent 2 weeks getting my blog up and my social media and my rebranding and all set to like beta test anecdotally there. Because the way that DEB is different, also, it's very foundational, because you can't get what you want unless you know what that is. So DEB is an exploration of figuring out that mission and how you want it to show up in the world, and then the steps to turn it into reality. And yes, I use DEB to create DEB. I'm very, very meta. But that was really the leap from all the different things. And then in the last couple of years, I started doing something called event outcome optimization, which is kind of a merging of content concierge with that networking piece, but it's all about setting goals for an event. So when you go, you meet the right people and you learn the information you need to build your business.
You and I, I feel like we need to do a separate, maybe on your show, we need to do a separate non-panel deep dive into this work that you're doing, because you and I could totally jam on this. I just came back from a week-long event, which was my first week-long event that I was traveling to in 9 years. I've gone to other, like I remember I went to Inbound in Boston, which is an enormous conference, but it was in my hometown. So while, yeah, it was big, like it just didn't feel quite the same, because I was like in my hometown and I knew a lot of people going. So this is my first time dropping in as a first timer since writing a book about networking at conferences. So, and I had to like do a lot of refreshing and like follow my best practices and like, do the work that I tell everyone else to do. So I'm actually planning to share a lot of that with my content and connection club over the next few weeks. I'm going to be sharing with them sort of how I prepped and what the results were. Because I think, we have a lot of lessons to learn about how do we know what we want. One of my takeaways that I always say is you're more likely to have serendipity if you know what you're looking for. So a lot of times we're just kind of go in, not having done that homework ahead of time. It sounds like you have a really thoughtful process, and we'll put links in the show notes to how to follow you and connect with you and all of that. I'm curious though, given that you were doing a lot of stuff related to events as I was back in, 2018, 2019, how did the pandemic like impact, derail, or amplify your message? Like what happened as the in-person kind of went away and you had to come up with a new way to offer these skills?
Well, it turned out I just seamlessly kind of slid in to doing webinars and workshops. So the part of the story that I left off as, so I come back from the conference and I'm all jazzed with Deb. I'm going to put out an ebook. And then I met an agent who I had actually seen speak several years before. One of the people from my live group had a goal to do more networking, and she sat next to this agent at an event and did an intro. And we realized that we had actually met before. And he said, Deb, what is your goal? And I said, to be the first person people think of when they hear the word goal. And he said, if that is your plan, send me your book proposal. Let's see if we can get your, don't self-publish. Let's see if we can find a publisher. So send him my book proposal. We got interest from Mango at the end of 2018. So in January 2020, so 6 weeks before everybody had changed by circumstance, out came my book to help people embrace change by choice or by circumstance. So the pandemic hit, and I was at an event, writers conference, that last weekend, that weekend, which was the last time we saw people. And I'd say within 2 weeks, I got emails from people who I had done in-person events before saying, Deb, people need the cheerleading. So I basically spent 2 years telling people the cosmic pause was a good thing. It's an opportunity to take a step back, rethink your life, and rethink your mission and make new plans.
It's interesting. From what I can tell, there were sort of two types of entrepreneurs in March 2020. Those that hit the brakes and took a big pause and said, oh, I'll wait till this goes back to quote unquote normal. And it'll just, it's fine. I'll take a little siesta for like a couple of months. It's fine. And then those folks were really like behind in September 2020 because the other entrepreneurs hit the gas and just tried a lot of new things and saw what worked and were innovating and reinventing themselves, and dare I say pivoting to find new opportunities. And it sounds like you're in that ladder, as I was, group of people who were like seeing what stuck, and it happened that your book was really well timed. January 2020, my TEDx talk that was sort of the culmination of over 10 years of speaking about and writing about networking at conferences was published, and I was poised to be an overnight success 10 years in the making. And then 2 months later, no one needed the information. So I had a little different take on how to rebrand myself. But it worked. It worked, as you well know. But I love that you didn't sort of miss a step, at least in the telling of the story now. I'm curious about your network and how your network sort of feeds into this. It sounds like you were helping people network, therefore you were getting better at networking. There are people who introduce you to different people along the way. You have your inner circle of people that you're going to stay in touch with, and you have sort of that second and third tiers or layers out, people you see once a year at a conference, or you work with them 5 years ago, but you really haven't had a reason to since. Oh, and you enjoy each other's company. That should be a given. How do you think about nurturing and sustaining those weaker connections? Any habits, philosophies, practices?
Well, set networking goals, of course. This is me after all. And I do remember, especially I'd say in 20 and 21, I probably went into meeting people overload. And I say meeting people rather than networking because there was a lot of that. All these people re-pivoting were starting a new event, and there was a lot out there. And I was probably doing 2-3 networking events a week. Also, by the way, not sustainable. I mean, okay. I say 3 networking opportunities a week, which is 1 educational, 1 mixer, and 1 one-on-one. I think everybody can do that. And then to supplement it, just send them a hi, how are you emails. That's a really good way to reconnect with people when those milestones come up on LinkedIn. Someone has a birthday or a job thing or whatever, and yes, comment if you want, but use that as kind of a reminder to check in with people, which I think is it's your connections aren't necessarily your clients, but everybody you meet is opportunities to be part of their tribe, which is an extension of you. So I think the biggest key with networking is to just embrace it and have it as a regular part of your life. But
Give me an example from your life. Like, do you have a spreadsheet or a CRM of people you want to nurture? Do you have times of the week that you're doing certain actions, or is it more intuitive as you think of people you follow up on that?
It's a mixture. So I do the intuitive thing. One of my things is because I do Goal Chat Live every Monday, which becomes the DEB Show podcast. And that is also a good reconnection opportunity. So if I have a topic, so I start the new year in December. So I will have these new topics at the end of the year, and then again in a different format in the beginning of the year. But I will go through my network and I will just put in those keywords and see, okay, who's a good fit, who would be a good person to reconnect with. But I also use it for connecting. So if total strangers, and I've been getting this year, I probably get a couple a week of people saying, "Oh, I found your podcast. I'd love to be on your show." Great. But my podcast is bringing people I know together. So you can't be on it unless I know you. So every month-ish, I host a meet and greet for potential guests. So people I don't know, I can connect with, and that's my own like quasi networking sort of thing. And then I will also know who from there is a good fit for a topic, or I will get topics from the people I have conversations with and then mix them up with other people.
I love
So
this idea that you have a networking opportunity for potential podcast guests, because you can't just invite them on because you don't know them well enough to know like what's the jam that you're gonna get them all together on. I find that really interesting. Is that intriguing for your potential guests to come and have the opportunity to network with other people? Like, how do people respond to that?
I've had a really good response to it, to the point that sometimes people who've been on the show before, they come too,
Yeah, I'm like,
because they
when is
want to meet.
that? I want to know. Sounds like
Uh,
interesting people to me. I mean, maybe not jury duty level of interesting, but interesting.
I will invite you. I just had one, so when I schedule the next one, I
Yeah.
will
I
definitely
I
clue
think
you
it's very
in.
creative. I think it's a really creative answer to the solution of like, I want to continue to do work with people I know, but I also want to create opportunities for me to know more people. Like, it's instead of it being just meeting everyone all the time, 1 hour at a time, which is exhausting, which is what you were doing in 2020. It's not sustainable. But it's kind of like me. I was hosting the No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour every week, now every month. And it's a free way to get entrepreneurs together. And it was, for me, a great way to sort of identify people and attract people into my orbit, who I then have done all kinds of work with, collaborations, client work, paying them and paying me, like collaborative, whatever, all that good stuff. So I love the idea of like, how do you take something and leverage it into a group format, paid or not, that serves the purpose of your business. And it's one I had never heard of before. And I also think you're very creative in doing, your podcast is always a panel. I'm curious how you came to that, since so many shows are this format, one person being interviewed. What led to you wanting to bring three people together and have them like spark ideas back and forth?
Oh, well, first of all, I love this question because I love this format so much. Before I sidetrack, I just sent someone I spoke with earlier to your Friday No More Bad Zooms, because I'm like,
Yes.
oh, we were doing, okay, who would be a good intro? And I'm like, well, Robbie's interviewing me today. Oh, you need to meet Robbie. You need to go to No More Bad Zoom.
NoMoreBadZoom.com, everybody. All right, we'll put a link in the show notes. Go ahead, Deb.
And the other benefit to the group format is I also get to see who plays well with others. So if we're having, and I usually have anywhere from 8 to 12 people on these, so not a big number, but it gives me an opportunity to see who is generous in conversations as well.
8 to 12 viewers, or 8 to 12
8 to
people?
12 people who come to these mixers.
Oh, I see. I got it. I see.
So that way I can see how they interact with others. So it's not just about the topic, it's which personality goes good with other personalities.
Yeah.
So my first pandemic project, aside from doing webinars, was my live show. And I started out, the first two was just me talking. And they lasted 10 minutes, 10 very painful minutes of me just talking into the ether. I'm going to bring on a guest. Let's see how that goes. So this what I did. So this was spring 2020. So we're getting towards December. And yes, this is what I call it, because we're kicking off the year. And I said, how do you throw a holiday party when you can't leave the house? Well, you bring together people who don't know each other and force them into conversation. And so that was the first panel, was the Start 2021 Now Goal Chat Live. And I really liked it. And I said, this is good. I'm going to do these once a month. And then I was doing them twice a month. And then I said, you know what? I just love this format so much. So I did away with the one-on-ones. And I love it because I get to bring together people who need to know each other, and everybody gets to meet everybody else's communities.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me several times to be on your show. I've been a last minute fill in, which was really fun. I've been part of a planned panel that keeps meeting over and over again with different topics. It is fun. It's how you and I really got to know each other. And yeah, I also think there are other ways we kind of know each other, like Innovation Women is another way that we know each other. Like, what are the other sort of ways you're networking these days in the world? Like, where, besides the things you're hosting, like what else are you going to in order to find your people?
Okay. Well, Innovation Women is my favorite. And so every Friday, and I'm on the West Coast, so it's every other Friday, there's a Zoom meetup to make speaker friends. And so that is the top tier group. I enjoy going to you've got an earlier in the day Zoom on No More Bad Zoom Fridays, and they're always quality people. The GEM meetup, which I also learned.
Generous Entrepreneurs in Media. I'm going to put links, by the way, friends, to all of these. I'll just first, let's interject. Innovation Women is run by Barbie Carlton, who I interviewed, put her link in the show notes as well. And she has a goal of helping underrepresented voices get on stages, specifically women, but anyone who's underrepresented. It's open to all genders. And she likes to say it's for women and secure men. I being one of the secure men, I guess, who's a member and an avid fan of her work. Generous Entrepreneurs in Media. .com. That is run by Jason Van Orden and Michael Roderick. I agree. It's a fantastic networking event. It attracts people who either have podcasts or want to be guests on podcasts or both. And it's a really fun in and out of breakout rooms format. And of course, my No More Bad Zoom happens the first Friday of the month, and is another in and out of breakout rooms, guest speaker, that kind of thing. So you just named my top. Those are my three favorite things too. What else am I missing? What are the other places you network that are so good?
Well, I just got involved with this new group run by Suzanne Taylor. It's called the Idea Lab for Entrepreneurs. And the one-on-one I had today was with someone I met through her, and I met her. Do you know Orly Amore?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Orly had one of her meetups, and I find that when you go to these networking events, whatever, it never hurts to connect with everybody. So whenever I go to any of these situations, I will do a LinkedIn connection request with a note that states where we met, so I don't have to go back to my calendar later and try and do math, because who wants to do math on purpose, right? So I met Suzanne through Orly's group, and then we did a group meeting a couple weeks ago, but I was the only one. So Suzanne and I had some one-on-one time, and then she introduced me to Daniel, who you will meet because I tagged him and invited him to No More Bad Zoom. So my point is, everybody that you meet at these events are not necessarily going to be a fit for you, but it's not going to hurt you to connect with the people that you meet at these events and then continue conversations. And at some of these, you don't necessarily even have one-on-ones, because we'll go into breakout rooms. Annie P. Ruggles, who I think you met through both me and Seth Goldstein, we met because we were at a networking meetup. I'm not going to name it because it's not one of the ones I recommend, but we didn't meet, but she saw in the chat that I created the DEB method, and she said, I need to meet the person who named her system after herself. So when you go to these events, find something unique about yourself that you can put in there that stands out. So you're not just another person who does this or that.
I love this. Okay, so here's some takeaways. One, a lot of the names we just mentioned, I interviewed. So this is probably going to be the most link heavy show notes ever, because I will put interview links to all these people that we're talking about, including Seth and Annie and Bobby and Jason and Michael and Dory Clark and I don't know who else I've missed. Don't worry, I have an assistant who'll make sure.
And Seth, you met because you were on a Goal Chat Live, aka the DEB Show, together.
Yeah, that was the one I dropped in last minute, and I tell you, like, that was a great connection to meet some new people and have those conversations. I think fantastic format for that. You know, for me, I think that anyone I meet is a potential referral partner, even if they're not a prospect. And so I work hard to try to help people know what I do and what they could refer me for and what to listen for, so that they know that's the kind of thing I do. But yeah, I love this. So in the closing minutes, we're about to get to my favorite wrap-up question. And before we do, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor. All right, as we wrap up things, this is my favorite question. We're getting to the end of this interview, but I know we're going to stay in touch. And I know a year from now, we're still going to know each other, probably going to be in each other's shows again. A year from now, when we're talking, what are you going to be celebrating? What am I going to be toasting you for? What are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I've been focusing right now in getting in front of companies that are still doing a hybrid and virtual work, because my DEB workshops, whether it's for goal setting simplified, event outcome optimization, or cooking for productivity, they're professional development, but with team building baked in. I like saying that about cooking for productivity. So this time next year, we're going to be celebrating, I guess, cooking for productivity being a thing. You know, the world, so much has changed in the world lately, but that need for connection isn't going to go away. And the fact, and I believe, which I'm guessing you are going to agree with, the smart businesses are the ones that are going to keep incorporating the virtual connections and those conversations. And when you are put in places together where you're not just exploring yourself, you're bonding, you're sharing the foods that you love and your dreams and your goals, those are connections. It's going to make your work life or entrepreneur life all the more better. So in conclusion, because I can't apparently answer a question shortly, we're going to be celebrating that success. And I want to write another book. So I've got a couple that are going. So let's celebrate that too.
I am excited to celebrate all of this with you, and I can't wait to support you in any way I can, particularly book launches. You know, it's my jam. So how can people find you and follow your work?
Well, I am at the DEB Method everywhere. And if you are listening, watching, please drop me a connection request with a note with "This is where we met" on LinkedIn. You can also email me, info@thedebmethod.com, and subscribe to The DEB Show and Taste Buds with Deb on your favorite podcast platforms.
Oh, fantastic. We'll put all those links in the show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. To your success, to everyone's success, because that's really, isn't that what these conversations are all about?
Sincerely.